Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. So this video comes in the context of what has been going on over the past couple of weeks and still the last few months. There has been a lot of discussion among the news media outlets, among investors. The overall market has been very concerned with what has been going on the economic front of the United States. And the topic of tariffs has been an ongoing concept that it's on everyone's minds and everyone is talking about it, and it has been a great catalyst of the volatility that we have been seeing in the markets lately. And so I think, especially for the less experienced investors and the less knowledgeable people who are still unaware of what is going on and what's his tariffs about, what they really are, and all that. I decided to make this video to make sure we provide some clearance and also to ensure that everyone is aware of what is going on currently and what's expected to happen moving forward. And so without further ado, let's get right into it. But first of all, I need to make a disclaimer here. This discussion is purely in the context of what is going on in the financial markets. This has no bearing with any good impression or bad impression that I may have in terms of who is sitting in the hot seat of the White House, who is the actual president of the United States. This is not relevant by any means to this discussion. And so the purpose of this is just to establish an unbiased perspective and for learning purposes. And that's it, all right? So please save the hate for the biased videos and all that may be going on somewhere else, but not here. All right. First and foremost, and with the prospect of new tariffs looming, I think several questions should be asked. This has been all over the media, as you can see here, on several news pieces and newspaper pieces. And so what needs to be established is, what are they, who will actually pay for them, do they work, and what are their potential problems, and what are their alternatives. All right. And so basically, and to start, a tariff is first and foremost a tax on imported goods. For example, if we live in the US and the United States decides to impose a 25% tariff on German automobiles, a German car that costs 100,000 euros can or would cost up to 125,000 euros to a US consumer. And keep in mind, I'm saying that it could cost up to, and not exactly 125,000 euros, because, for example, the company can decide simply to absorb some of this cost and not translate or not pass on this entire cost to the consumer. And so, for example, it can cost only 120,000 euros, and the company simply decides, all right, we can absorb 5% of this tariff. The remaining 20% we will reflect on the final on a final consumer price. This can be done. Many companies, to keep some of their demand that they would expect to lose, they do this kind of absorption of costs, not to increase those prices that much, but this is what happens basically. But in any case, companies for the most part only absorb one small portion of these extra costs. And so in any case, it is the US consumer who pays the tariff in its entirety or most of it, and not the car manufacturer, because of course they operate with a profit of margin, and so they need to have a profit of margin beyond on top of the costs, and so they will be mostly spared in terms of who bears the brunt of the tariff. And of course, the proceeds are basically a revenue for the U.S. government. And now the question comes, since we now know what the tariffs are, why the government decides to impose tariffs. And so basically, the most pressing reason is that they get more revenue, either to fund spending or to pay back debt, whatever the purpose is. It's either one of those. It's either one of these two, and so basically they get more revenue. Another potential reason is to protect domestic industries by making their goods relatively cheaper than the goods from the foreign competitors. A tariff makes foreign goods artificially more expensive, and so consumers will be incentivized to buy domestic products from domestic industries because these products will be relatively cheaper. So it's a matter of consumers adapting their consumption preferences towards domestic products to the detriment of foreign goods. Another reason, and so far all these reasons are relevant in the case of the United States, because the government is struggling with a large budget deficit, a mounting debt of stock of debt, which currently more than 30 trillion in the US units of dollars. They also want to protect the domestic industries, especially their manufacturing industries. The Rust Belt, the states of the Midwest, are much more reliant on manufacturing than the states on the East and West Coast. So this is an attempt to protect those jobs and protect those industries. Also, because the United States runs a large trade deficit with its trading partners and wants to reduce that deficit, basically the tariffs is a way to reduce the imports, even though they have the byproduct of the consequence of appreciating the home currency, because imports are reduced, so there is less demand on the other currencies relative to the US. So the home currency, the US dollar, is likely to appreciate. But by reducing imports, they improve the trade balance, basically. As I said, increase the home currency value as the trade balancing improves. Now, I must say, I'm probably going to make another video on this, because the current US administration wants to depreciate the currency to make exports, to basically incentivize the exports in the United States, but increasing the home currency value, the US dollar, goes against that objective. So probably I will make another video on this. So stay tuned. And the last thing, and also important, and it's also relevant in the case of the United States, to retaliate against protectionist policies from other countries. For example, the subsidies, the large subsidies that the Chinese government provides to Chinese companies for specific industries, and this is a way of offsetting those policies. Now, having said that, there are also problems, and there are many, with the tariffs. First and foremost, consumers. The US consumer pays, as we mentioned before, most or all of the extra cost of the tariffs. So in the end, they will pay more for all goods. All goods, I said correctly, including foreign and domestic. And why is that? Why the domestic? Because, for this reason, first and foremost, they may also face higher costs for their inputs if they need to import. If a US company needs to import their inputs from abroad, they may pay tariffs on those inputs as well, and so they will have to raise their prices. But also because the goods sold by the domestic companies will become relatively cheaper in comparison to the foreign goods, to the goods of the foreign companies. There is an incentive for domestic companies also to increase their prices, but by a lower extent, by a lesser extent than the prices of foreign companies, foreign goods. and so they might want to raise the prices just to close the gap, close the price difference between the goods of produced domestically and the products produced abroad. And so this is why also the domestic products will become more expensive, and consumers, of course, will have to pay for them as well. Another problem, and this has been also extensively covered by the media, targeted countries can retaliate. We already seen that in China. China has already announced retaliatory tariffs. Canada is also announced as well. The European Union is also due to do the same, and so yeah, basically this will have this bears this resembles strongly the foundations of a new trade war. And so also another problem is that the protected industries, the domestic ones, have less incentives to innovate and offer competitive goods at reasonable prices because they are protected from foreign competition. The race to innovate and have the best product to provide to consumers is less, and so but keep in mind they continue to have the incentive to raise their prices a little bit to close the price difference relative to the foreign goods. And so this is a double whammy for the US consumer to bear, because they will have less competitive products and higher prices. And so in the nutshell is the consumer that suffers the most. Now, there might be situations in which tariffs make sense, for example, to offset another country protectionist measures. As I mentioned, subsidies to exporting industries. If for example, in the case of China, if China provides large subsidies to exporting industries, this is a negative tariff. Another way to put it is a negative tariff. So by imposing tariffs, we offset, or the United States offset the subsidies of that China provides to their industries. And also another protectionist measure is the China's currency devaluation during the 2010s, because they have a large trade surplus. If nothing was done, the Chinese currency would appreciate, because a lot of demand is on that currency to pay back for the goods. But then China intervenes on a market to sell their currency, the Chinese yuan, and buy other currencies. And so by doing that, the currency devalues, and so they can keep their exports competitive in terms of price. And so a tariff is an attempt to offset these kind of protectionist measures. Also, another one is to protect nascent industries from foreign competition, of course, allowing them, while they are very newly established and they are not yet mature, by protecting them from foreign competition, they mature, they can become more competitive against the foreign competitors, and of course assuming that eventually they will trade under free trade conditions. And another one, which is also very relevant today in an era where artificial intelligence, rare minerals, high tech such as semiconductors industries are extremely relevant to the dominance of specific countries. It may make sense to implement tariffs and keep in order to keep those industries within borders, and so to ensure that for the national security interest, these industries can provide their products under any circumstances. And so this may make sense when it comes to the implementation of tariffs. Now, under the current situation, what will happen next, or what is likely to happen next? Target countries are likely to retaliate, and so by doing so, creating a trade war. We already see countries following suit with tariffs. The EU Commission is also preparing to do so, or the European Union is also preparing to do so. And so they can do that, those trading partners can do that either by by imposing their own tariffs, which would hurt their own consumers. For example, here in Europe, if the European Union imposes tariffs, that means that we, European consumers, will pay more for the importing goods, which will make us also worse off. But another way to do it is, for example, to place export duties on goods sold to the country imposing the tariffs in the first place. For example, if the European Union decides to implement export duties on goods sold to the United States, we, European consumers, we are protected, remain protected, and the US consumer will suffer a double whammy because they will have to pay the tariff for the tariff implemented by the United States, and will have to pay by the export duties that the European Union is imposing on exports to the US. So they suffer doubly, in a double way, from this trade war, basically. Another thing which is less talked about, but target countries have an incentive to ally themselves. For example, the European Union with Canada or the European Union with China, they have an incentive, or more of an incentive, to sign trade deals to enhance trade relations among them, and by doing so they offset the reduced trade relations with the country imposing tariffs, in this case the United States. Now, another way that they can ally themselves is combining that, alright, we are being targeted with tariffs by the United States, alright, we are going to ally our efforts and we are imposing tariffs together against the United States. And so by doing so, they basically are trying to level the playing field and strengthening their position relative to the position that the country imposing the tariffs is trying to achieve in the first place in the dynamics of trade. Now, another relevant consequence, and this is something that is already happening, for example, between the US and Canada, it is an anti-tariffing country, or in this case, anti-US feeling that may rise among the target country's consumers. For example, you can already see in the news, on several news pieces, that, for example, in Canada, you already have many stores saying, alright, this is a Canadian product, or buy Canadian, this is a United States product, and this allows, what is the incentive behind this, is to make the Canadian consumer not to buy US products, but to buy Canadian products. And so there is this anti-feeling about the country imposing the tariffs in the first place can rise, and is already rising in this case, and so this may further hurt the economy of the country imposing the tariffs. Now, in terms of alternatives, instead of tariffs, there are other measures which can achieve similar results. Temporary tax breaks, temporary subsidies to those industries intended to be protected to allow them to catch up to their foreigner competitors. Now, keep in mind, both these measures have issues, but tax breaks align by a little bit better the interest between the industry and the government, because subsidies is just giving money away, and who knows what the companies are doing with their money. At least with tax breaks, they continue to do business and have an incentive to keep expanding and improving their business so that they get more of their tax breaks. Also, another thing, and this is something that has been completely overlooked, is basically to negotiate and renegotiate current trade deals, because any measures taken unilaterally are likely to trigger retaliation from other parties. And so, given the current situation of the United States with a large budget deficit and a large national debt, sitting at the negotiating table is a wiser option, except in the situations in which its trading partners are not keeping their end of the deal. We all know that China, for example, has adopted extensively protective measures, so it makes sense to do something against that. and tariffs are a way to do it. Not the only solution, but there are some measures. It is a measure that can be done. Now, against close trading partners such as Canada or the European Union, it makes much less sense, because these are countries that are trying to get as much free trade as possible with the United States, and so it makes less or no sense to being the one taking a unilateral measure to improve their position to the detriment of the other positions of the other parties. But let me know what you think. Leave a comment below. Share your opinion. Of course, try to keep it as politically unbiased as possible. And yeah, that's it. Feel free to also, besides leaving your comments below, feel free also to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And as I mentioned, probably I will make another video on the currency, because there are some measures taken by the United States which having opposing effects on the currency, and even though they are adamant, the U.S. administration is adamant that they want to devalue the currency, but apparently some of those measures are consistent with that objective, but another ones are not. And so this is something that is also has influence on the markets, especially for foreign investors which are exposed to the US dollar. And so we will have to also probably have to discuss that further down the line. But yeah, I'll see you on the next one.